Hey everyone, Tactics here. And we have an emergency recording here because we got a very big blue post coming out this evening from Kaivax here. So there is some Mythic Plus progression changes and more coming soon. So let's go through this post because it's pretty impactful here. And you can see right here at the top, this is kind of why. So immediately here, they've heard the feedback around challenges in the new Keystone Affix and scaling structure. Of course, that is the squish that has happened. That's caught a lot of people off guard with the difficulty of Mythic Plus. And so they're adjusting where you get the crests here. So runed crests, those are the heroic crests. They're now going to be awarded up to +7, which means gilded crests, the mythic or crests rather, are going to be awarded now at +8, down from +9. So you're going to be able to get these a little bit more easily than you were before, which is a really nice change. They're definitely a bit scarce for a lot of players, so you're going to be able to get these a little bit easier now. Of course, your max vault is still going to be coming from 10s, but at least now you have a path to kind of upgrade your gear to empower yourself to hopefully make 10s a little bit easier, even if you're not able to spam out things like 9s and 10s yourself. Moving down, we have some more changes here to the actual affixes. So to start, the xal'atath bargain affixes, these are the 4 rotating affixes that we've now seen all 4 of. Their buff is going up to 30 seconds. Previously, it was a 20-second buff. So this is a pretty significant boost to the benefits. We're getting the kiss, as some would say, from these kiss curse affixes. So that is pretty nice to see. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Again, this is doing things like making 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s a little bit easier now because you're going to be more empowered for throughout the dungeon, which is pretty nice to see. Xal'atath's Guile, this is the affix that turns on at +12 when the bargain affixes are removed. This has now been halved, so the scaling in terms of health and damage is now only 10% when this turns on instead of 20%, and this is massive. This is a huge change, right? I think the way the math works, I think like a 12 was basically equivalent to like a 14 and a half or something like that. So like going from 11 to 12 was really going from 11 to a 14 and a half. And now that number is much closer to 13 with this change. So the jump is nowhere near as massive, which is really good to see. I mean, you saw a lot of people have been talking about it. Oh, whether that's, in game, in Discords, on Twitter, all those kinds of things about how the jump is insanely huge between an 11 and a 12. And so this is aimed at, of course, helping that. I think my preference would have been to remove the damage aspect of this entirely, because I personally am not a fan of the keys getting too one-shotty too quickly. And that seemed like it was kind of a bit of the case, especially like melee swing damage on tanks is like crazy when this affix kind of turns on, and it gets out of control very quickly. So that's still my preference, I think, but I will take just a halving of this affix as well. Very nice to see. Hopefully this allows maybe pug groups to actually do 12s now. Hopefully it allows more people to experience 12 plus keys. That would be great. And so good change over here. On top of these kind of more system-based changes, there's also a bunch of dungeon tuning here to Necrotic Wake and Stone Vault specifically. And of course, finally, Surgeon Stitchflesh has caught the nerf bat. So we see here they've made a change to the weapon. So Bloody Javelins previously stacked, they no longer stack. So that's going to have a negative impact on Stitchflesh, of course, because the general strategy that a lot of groups were using on Stitchflesh was to just stack all 3 of your spears, nuke the boss down in one phase, or just maybe a second phase, but the creation would be dead. And so to compensate for that, they're giving Stitchflesh a 20% health nerf. And then on top of that, they're also nerfing the rot damage from the creations by 30%. Very good nerf. This was absolutely murdering people. Personally, I think I'd still like to see the creation's health get dropped a little bit. Those guys are just so tanky. Like, you would barely kill one with like 2 javelins, 3 javelins stacked up on both the boss and the creation. And so potentially with this change, I think, but the strat's probably like, this is still going to be, I think, the gatekeeper boss. In my opinion, you're probably going to see maybe groups save all their javelins still, but then just use one at a time. Like Stitchflesh comes down, you javelin, that helps you cleave the creation and Stitchflesh in time. The next creation comes out, Stitchflesh jumps back up, comes back down. You throw another javelin, that kind of thing. I'm guessing that's going to be the new strategy. So you want at least 2 spears for Stitchflesh. But still, I think overall this is a good change. Maybe needs a little bit more in terms of the creation health, but I think generally this is going to help a lot of pug groups out, especially groups that weren't using the stacking the spear strategy. It's going to make the fight significantly easier. Probably going to make this fight a little bit harder for groups that were stacking spears rather. So something to consider there. Gatekeepers also caught yet another nerf. I think these guys are worth the count now. I've been on that train, I think, since the previous nerf, but I think with another 25% periodic damage nerf to this AoE, especially in your first pull with Bloodlust, I think these guys are probably worth the count. On top of this, the monstrosity is worth more count now. So potentially you're going to actually be able to skip some mobs in Necrotic Wake now, which is probably nice. Going to make rooting a little bit more interesting. Now also have a couple boss nerfs here in Stone Vault. Skarmorak catching the most, 10% off his health. He's stunned for longer when you break his shell, and also that eruption damage is reduced here. So this is one of those bosses that was, because he constantly throws up that shield, it is kind of, gonna scale with Tyrannical excessively compared to some of the other bosses, just because he constantly gets extra health, and the longer he lives, the more extra health he gets. So it's kind of that vicious cycle almost on him. So good to see him get brought down a little bit here. And then, of course, Void Speaker Eirik, the final boss, also caught a 10% health nerf, very significant health nerf. And the cooldown of his Reckoning, which I believe is his frontal, was increased. So he's going to be doing that less often. I think a lot of people were talking about how Stone Vault was a pretty punishing timer. The timer was quite tough to meet. So 10% off 2 of the bosses here. It's going to do a fair bit to help reduce the time you spend in that dungeon. So going to make the timer a little bit more lenient now with those nerfs. And the biggest thing is up here. I think there are some adjustments today, and we're working on more coming soon. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what else they're going to do with the system here. I would love to hear what you guys think about the changes to crests. Do you guys also want to see a change to how the vault works? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, know just generally, how are you guys feeling about this Mythic Plus season now that we've had it for several weeks? I know people initially were a little bit down on it. We've had, what, 4 rounds of tuning so far, and apparently more on the way, which is always nice to see this level of tuning. And obviously people will prefer things to just not be overtuned to begin with, but that's not realistic in my opinion. So the consistent nerfs and the attention Blizzard has actually had on these dungeons has definitely been nice to see in my opinion. But again, would love to hear what you guys think. Are you guys more interested in pushing above 12s now with this nerf to xal'atath Guile? You're just going to stick to the 10s or the 9s or whatever you've been doing? Let me know. Otherwise, shout out to my Patreons, of course, for their support and for letting me to make this content, make these emergency videos. Make sure you check out all of my Keystone Hero guides, which are now available over on my channel, and I'll see everyone in the next video.